Right before Thanksgiving, my sister said, "Don't bother coming unless you're finally useful." That same day, my parents begged me to co-sign her mortgage. I sent her $1 and a note that said, "Hope this helps." She called me furious, screaming, "You think this is funny?" I, 32 never thought the words, "finally useful," would change everything between my sister and me, but here we are. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my accounting firm. My sister's voice carried that familiar edge of entitlement mixed with barely concealed disgust. She told me not to bother showing up for Thanksgiving unless I was finally going to be useful to the family instead of just sitting there like a decoration. The words hit harder than they should have, considering our history, but something about the timing felt deliberate. See, my sister had always been the golden child. While I spent college working 2 jobs to pay my way through state school, she sailed through an expensive private university on my parents' dime. When I graduated and started building my career from the ground up, she moved back home and spent 3 years finding herself while my parents covered her expenses. Even now, at 35, she had a pattern of grand gestures followed by financial disasters that somehow always became family emergencies. The irony of her comment about usefulness wasn't lost on me. 3 hours after her Thanksgiving ultimatum, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother, and her voice carried that particular strain that meant my sister had created another crisis. My parents explained the situation in careful, diplomatic terms. My sister had found her dream house, a Victorian fixer-upper in an expensive neighborhood that she absolutely had to have. The problem was her credit score, which had apparently taken a beating after some poor financial decisions involving maxed-out credit cards and a defaulted car loan. The bank required a co-signer with excellent credit and steady income. Someone exactly like me. My mother painted the picture carefully. My sister had already put down earnest money. The closing was scheduled for the week after Thanksgiving. Without a co-signer, she would lose everything she had invested and be back to square one. My parents had tried to help, but their retirement income wasn't sufficient for the bank's requirements. I was, according to my mother, the family's only hope. The request felt surreal given the conversation I had had with my sister just hours earlier. My parents seemed genuinely unaware of what she had said to me, which made the whole situation even more twisted. They spoke about family obligation and how we all needed to support each other through difficult times. They reminded me of how my sister had been there for me during my divorce 2 years ago, conveniently forgetting that her version of support had been telling me I was better off alone anyway. I told my parents I needed time to think about it. The truth was, I had already made my decision the moment my sister told me not to bother coming to Thanksgiving. But I wanted to let the situation develop a bit more before I made my move. That evening, I did some research. Co-signing a mortgage meant I would be legally responsible for the debt if my sister defaulted. Given her financial track record, this wasn't just possible, but probable. The house she wanted was priced at $420,000, well above what someone with her income should reasonably afford. The monthly payments alone would stretch her budget to the breaking point, assuming she could maintain steady employment. I spent the next day crafting my response. I went to the bank and withdrew a single-dollar bill, one of the old ones that still looked crisp and official. Then I wrote a note on my company letterhead. "Hope this helps with your mortgage situation. Good luck with everything." I put both items in an envelope and had it delivered to my sister's apartment by courier. The reaction was immediate and explosive. My sister called me within an hour of receiving the package, her voice shaking with rage. She screamed about how I thought this was all some kind of joke, how I was being petty and vindictive when she needed real help. She told me I was proving exactly what she had always known about me, that I was selfish and useless when it actually mattered. I listened to her rant without interrupting, letting her dig herself deeper with each accusation. When she finally paused for breath, I reminded her of our conversation about Thanksgiving. I quoted her exact words back to her, asking if she remembered telling me not to bother coming unless I was finally useful. I explained that I was simply following her guidance by not bothering her with my presence or my usefulness. The silence that followed was deafening. She tried to backtrack, claiming she had been stressed and didn't mean it the way it sounded. She said family members say things they don't mean sometimes, and I was being ridiculous for taking it so seriously. She insisted that co-signing her mortgage was completely different from whatever petty argument we had been having. I told her she was absolutely right. Co-signing a mortgage was much more serious than a family dinner. If she thought I was too useless to sit at a dinner table, she probably shouldn't want me co-signing legal documents that could affect her financial future for the next 30 years. My parents called that evening, confused and upset. My sister had told them about my response, though apparently her version of events omitted the part about her Thanksgiving ultimatum. They wanted to understand why I was being so difficult about helping family. They reminded me that I made good money and had no significant financial obligations since my divorce. They suggested that maybe I was still bitter about my sister's success and was looking for ways to sabotage her happiness. I explained the full situation to my parents, including the exact conversation my sister and I had earlier that day. I watched their expressions change as they realized what had actually happened. My father got quiet in that way he did when he was processing something that disappointed him. My mother tried to find middle ground, suggesting that maybe we could all sit down and work through this misunderstanding together. But I was done with misunderstandings and family diplomacy. I told my parents that my sister had made her position clear about my value to the family, and I was simply respecting her wishes. If I wasn't useful enough for Thanksgiving dinner, I certainly wasn't useful enough to risk my financial stability on her behalf. The days leading up to Thanksgiving became increasingly tense. My sister tried multiple approaches to change my mind. She sent me long text messages apologizing for her poor choice of words and explaining how stressed she had been about the house situation. She had my parents call me separately to advocate for her position. She even reached out to our mutual friends, painting me as the stubborn brother who was letting petty arguments destroy family relationships over money. None of it worked because none of it addressed the real issue. This wasn't about money or co-signing mortgages. This was about years of being treated as the family backup plan, someone who existed primarily to solve problems and provide support, but wasn't really valued as a person. My sister's comment about being useful had crystallized something I had been feeling for years, but hadn't been able to articulate. Update 1. Thanksgiving arrived, and I spent it with my ex-wife's family, something that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago, but had become a comfortable tradition. They had always treated me more like family than my actual family did, and the contrast was striking. No one questioned my usefulness or made snide comments about my contributions. I helped cook, played with the kids, and enjoyed genuine conversations with people who seemed happy I was there. My phone buzzed periodically with messages from my family. My parents sent photos from their dinner, pointedly including shots of my empty chair. My sister sent increasingly desperate updates about her mortgage situation. The bank had extended her deadline until the Monday after Thanksgiving, but without a co-signer, she would lose the house and her earnest money. I turned off my phone and focused on enjoying my evening. On Friday, my sister showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked exhausted and defeated, which was unusual for someone who typically maintained perfect composure even during crises. She asked if we could talk, and I invited her in despite my better judgment. She sat on my couch and finally told me the truth about her financial situation. The house wasn't just a dream purchase, it was an escape plan. She had been living paycheck to paycheck for months, maxing out credit cards to maintain her lifestyle. Her apartment lease was ending, and her landlord had refused to renew because of late payments. She needed the house not just as an investment, but as a place to live that she could actually afford long-term. The admission was more honest than any conversation we had had in years, but it also confirmed my suspicions about co-signing her mortgage. She wasn't just asking me to help her buy a house. She was asking me to become financially responsible for someone who was already in serious financial trouble. The risk of default wasn't theoretical, it was almost guaranteed. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but it didn't change my position. If anything, learning about her financial problems made me more certain that co-signing would be a disaster for both of us. I suggested she look into first-time homebuyer programs, consider less expensive properties, or explore other options that didn't involve putting my credit and finances at risk. She started crying then, which was something I hadn't seen since we were children. She told me she understood why I was angry about the Thanksgiving comment, but she was desperate and didn't know what else to do. She said she had always resented how easily things seemed to come to me, how I had managed to build a stable career and financial security while she struggled with everything. The comment about being useful had come from that resentment, not from any real belief that I wasn't valuable to the family. For a moment, I felt the old familiar pull to fix her problems and smooth over family tensions. But then I remembered all the other times I had bailed her out, all the other crises that had somehow become my responsibility to solve. This pattern would never change unless someone broke it. I told her I was sorry about her situation, but I wouldn't be co-signing her mortgage. I offered to help her research other options or connect her with a financial counselor, but I wasn't going to risk my financial stability on her behalf. She left without saying goodbye, and I knew our relationship had fundamentally changed. Update 2. The Monday after Thanksgiving, my sister lost the house. She also lost her earnest money, nearly $10,000 that she had scraped together from various sources. My parents called to update me on the situation and to express their disappointment in my decision. They felt I had been cruel and vindictive when I could have easily helped solve the problem. But something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed. Without the house as an option and facing homelessness, my sister was forced to make real changes to her financial situation. She moved in with a roommate in a much smaller apartment, took on freelance work to supplement her income, and started working with a credit counselor to address her debt problems. My parents gradually began to understand my position, especially as more details about my sister's financial problems came to light. They realized that co-signing her mortgage would have been setting both of us up for failure, not helping anyone build a better future. The most surprising development came in January. My sister called me on a Tuesday evening, not to ask for help, but to thank me. She told me that losing the house had been devastating at first, but it had forced her to confront problems she had been avoiding for years. She was working with the credit counselor, had a realistic budget for the first time in her adult life, and was actually saving money each month. She apologized for the Thanksgiving comment and for years of taking my help for granted. She said she finally understood that real support meant helping someone build their own stability, not just bailing them out of every crisis. She wasn't ready for us to go back to our old relationship, but she wanted me to know that she respected my decision and understood why I had made it. We didn't magically become close siblings overnight, but we started having real conversations for the first time in years. She stopped asking me to solve her problems and started asking for advice instead. I stopped feeling obligated to fix everything and started enjoying our interactions again. By the time the next Thanksgiving rolled around, things had changed completely. My sister was living in a modest apartment she could actually afford, had paid off 2 of her credit cards, and was working toward buying a smaller house within her actual budget. She invited me to Thanksgiving dinner personally, telling me she hoped I would come because she wanted me there, not because she needed anything from me. I went to dinner that year, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was there because my family actually wanted my company. My sister had cooked most of the meal herself, something she had never done before because my parents had always handled everything. She seemed proud of her independence in a way that was new and genuine. During dinner, she brought up the previous year's situation without prompting. She told everyone at the table that I had made the right decision by refusing to co-sign her mortgage, even though it had been painful at the time. She explained how losing the house had forced her to face her financial problems and build real stability instead of just lurching from crisis to crisis. My parents admitted they had been wrong to pressure me about the co-signing situation. They said they had been so focused on trying to solve the immediate problem that they hadn't considered the long-term consequences for either of us. They thanked me for having the courage to make the difficult decision when they couldn't. Update 3. It's been 2 years now since the mortgage situation, and my relationship with my family has stabilized in ways I didn't expect. My sister bought a small starter home last spring, using her own credit and a down payment she had saved over 18 months. She invited me to the housewarming party, and I was genuinely proud of what she had accomplished on her own. The house isn't the Victorian dream home she had originally wanted, but it's hers in a way that the other house never could have been. She makes her payments easily, has an emergency fund, and talks about her plans for renovations that she'll pay for in cash as she saves up for them. The contrast with her previous financial chaos is remarkable. More importantly, our family dynamics have shifted in lasting ways. My parents no longer automatically turn to me when my sister has problems, and my sister no longer expects me to bail her out of difficult situations. Instead of being the family problem solver, I've become someone they actually enjoy spending time with. My sister and I talk regularly now, usually about normal sibling things like work stress, dating disasters, and home improvement projects. She asks for my advice sometimes, but she doesn't expect me to fix her problems. When I offer help, it's because I want to, not because I feel obligated or guilty. The whole situation taught me something important about family relationships and boundaries. For years, I had confused enabling with supporting, and I had let guilt and family pressure override my own judgment. By refusing to co-sign the mortgage, I had forced everyone to confront patterns that weren't healthy for any of us. Looking back, that single dollar bill and note might have been the best investment I ever made. Not because it was cruel or vindictive, but because it drew a clear line that forced everyone to reevaluate what family support actually means. Real support isn't about preventing people from experiencing consequences. It's about helping them build the skills and stability to handle life's challenges independently. My sister still has the note I sent with the dollar bill. She keeps it in her kitchen as a reminder of how far she's come and how important it is to maintain her financial independence. Sometimes she jokes that it was the most expensive dollar she ever received, since it cost her a house but gained her a future. We never explicitly discussed the deeper issues about usefulness and family value, but our actions over the past 2 years have spoken louder than any conversation could have. I'm no longer the family member who exists primarily to solve problems, and she's no longer the family member who creates them. We're just siblings who happen to like each other's company, which is something I hadn't experienced since childhood. The whole experience changed how I approach relationships in general. I've learned to distinguish between helping someone and enabling them, between being supportive and being taken advantage of. These lessons have improved not just my family relationships, but my friendships and professional interactions as well. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not helping my sister with the mortgage, especially since things worked out well for her in the end. But I think that's exactly why I don't regret it. Things worked out well precisely because she was forced to develop real financial skills and independence. If I had co-signed that mortgage, she might have made the payments for a few months before defaulting, leaving us both in financial ruin and our relationship destroyed beyond repair. Instead, we both learned valuable lessons about boundaries, independence, and what family support actually looks like. My sister learned that she was capable of much more than she had believed, and I learned that saying no to family doesn't make you a bad person. Sometimes it makes you the person they need you to be.